You know, the juxtaposition, the polarity in life sometimes is just bizarre. In so many ways, this last year has been really successful for me. 100 or so clients through my coaching program with an incredibly high success rate as per industry standards. In terms of my social life, travel, adventure, solid friendships, so many interesting stories from this last 12 months or so. But simultaneously, I have had some absolute howlers this year. And for some bizarre reason, I feel weirdly compelled, as uncomfortable as this is about to make me, to share some of my biggest ball drops from the last 12 months with you. So without further ado, let's get into them. First up, I invested way too much money on activities that did not generate a high ROI, return on investment. In a far less pretentious and business sounding manner, basically I spent way too much cash on things that didn't really move the needle in my business. Whilst this last year has not been bad in terms of financial income, never have I spent so much money in my life as in the last 12 months. My expenses, by their usual standards, were absolutely through the roof. I spent a lot of money working with George, my photographer, and videographer, and George did really help me relieve a lot of the stress of having to make content online every day for Instagram and YouTube, and so I could just really focus on working with my clients. George massively helped in that regard. I also worked with a business coach this year to help me better understand the coaching industry, to help me better understand how to develop my business, how to get the vegan, slim and sustained message out there. And again, both of these activities did have use. I'm not writing them off whatsoever. Absolutely not. They did have use. But the question is, did they warrant the expense that they incurred? Did they move the needle in my business? To the extent to which I could actually justify my spending on them as frequently as I did throughout the year. And sadly, this took me 10, 11 months to wake up to, but the harsh answer is no, they didn't. They didn't actually help me as much as I anticipated, as much as I hoped for, although they were useful. The lesson for me being, it's not the end of the world, but going forward, I'm still going to work with George. I'm still going to have business coaches. I'm still going to get help. Everyone needs help with stuff. But at the same time, I think I'm just going to be very, very careful and very, very analytical about not making emotional decisions in rash situations like I did a few times last year to hire people or to get help, and really think quite sensibly about, will this activity actually generate more income? Will this activity actually help me do a better job for my clients? And if the answer is no, then I'll think twice about doing it in the first place. Screw up number 2 here is another financial one. I promise we'll come into the personal stuff shortly. I lost an awful lot of money in crypto this year, an amount that I would be embarrassed to tell even very close friends and family. For those of you that didn't know, I've been big on crypto for a couple of years, and actually, to play devil's advocate with what I'm about to share, it had been, until September at least, a stellar investment for me over the last couple of years. It had been really good in terms of generating, decent money for me. Probably the second best investment I've made over the last couple of years, outside of excluding the investment that I've made back into my business. So it had done well. But I think for me, as many of you will know, it crashed hard in September. I think for me, I was late to withdraw funds. I was late to sell things when I really should have, and I saw warning signs, and I had people advise me that this might be a good time to sell certain assets. And I think for me, a combination of 3 things really messed me up and really made me drop the ball on this. Frankly, it doesn't feel nice to admit, but number 1 was greed. The second was ideological stubbornness, because I've been so big on crypto's message as a proverbial almost fingers up to the centralized banking system. And then also, thirdly, what I could best describe as being overly eager to not have cash sitting around in the bank and watching it get devalued, by this ridiculous rate of inflation that we seem to have at the moment. And I think for me, that might sound like a good thing, right? It might sound good that I wanted to park my money elsewhere because it's losing value just sat in a bank, and to actually invest it. That might sound like a good trait, and I would agree it does sound like a good trait on paper. But if the solution to that is that you make quite rash decisions and you don't make diversified decisions, which I'm not always best at, I must admit, with my finances, then that's not the solution, right? Better to just have the cash in the bank and actually do something safe and secure in the first instance. Also, that's the lesson I've now learned. And I think that's it for me. A combination of those 3 things came together to meant that I didn't really make the moves at the times that I should have, and that in hindsight were obvious to me, and I actually had warning signs. It's worse. It feels worse for me. I feel more guilty about it. I have less peace of mind because I even had the warning signs, because I was even relatively well researched on the topic at the time, and I was closely watching things things, and I still didn't move my money around at the times that, in hindsight, I should have. Mistake number 3, there were times where I seriously lacked direction this year. I think in of itself, that's of course not a mistake. There are periods of life where we do feel unclear about what our path is going forward or our ultimate end goals. The mistake, though, was that for some reason, I really procrastinated on doing the things that would help me give direction. The things that I know through experience allow me to find answers and allow me to have realizations and epiphanies on what those next steps for me might look like. For example, speaking to the 2 or 3 confidants in my life that I really trust, going out into a different environment, getting away from my usual routine, that can help me get creative. Going out into nature, just doing a simple walk a couple of times a week, which I hadn't been doing. I've been walking around my city lots because I live in a city anyway, but like a really purposeful walk on my own, seeing lots of green, getting in nature where I can have my best ideas. I wasn't seeing past my limiting beliefs either. I was letting them sort of overwhelm me and choke me up, and I just froze with not knowing the path. And again, it's fine to not know your path forward, as I say. What I'm disappointed in myself about in hindsight was that I just didn't do the time-tested things that I know help give me clarity. I didn't speak, for example, to my very, very good friend Doug, who usually is really helpful when it comes to making these big decisions about my next steps in life. And so I think I've sorted it out as the year has ended, but it was the delay. It was the fact that I was letting this stuff come into my mind, knowing that I was getting slightly overwhelmed about what was next, and not really talking to anyone about it or not really trying to troubleshoot it for a month, just sort of burying my head in the sand about it. And it felt uncharacteristic. I've always felt very clear on where I am going forward. And even if I don't have that clarity, I've sort of, it sounds slightly braggadocious, I suppose, but sort of I've been priding myself for the last couple of years on just taking action, even if I'm not 100% sure. And I sort of lost my mojo with that, I think, in the middle part of this year. It's coming back now, I'm glad to report. Number 4, I said I'd get a car this year. In January, I was like, all right, I'm going to get a car. It's going to allow me a little bit more freedom. Even though I live in a city, it'd be nice to be able to do day trips in the car. It would be nice if there's an emergency situation. My grandparents getting a little bit older now down in Devon, a couple of hours away from me. It'd be nice if a friend was in trouble, I could just go and jump in the car and I wasn't reliant on public transport. That would be lovely. And that's what I said to myself in January, and I started taking steps towards that goal of getting a car. We're now in December and I don't have the car. Now, how I justified this throughout the year was as follows. I started looking at the price of parking permits in my city, the availability of parking spots because I don't have a driveway myself because I'm very central. I started looking at prices of cars I might wish to purchase, the increase in fuel costs over the last year or so. And I found lots of reasons as to why this was actually a terrible investment for me into something that I probably only use one time per week. Now, here's what irks me, because you might be thinking, well, it makes sense, Ryan. You backtracked, but you backtracked for good reasons. Here's what irks me. I hate, as I'm sure many of you will resonate with, I hate when I break promises. Whether it's to other people in my life or myself. And I made a promise in January that I'd get a darn car this year, and I'm still here in December and I don't have one, and it bothers me. And you know what bothers me? Even though my reasoning for not getting a car, hand on heart, I believe is sound and is not excuse-based, these are legitimate reasons as to why it makes no sense for me to get a car right now in my life. As much as I believe that to be true, that it makes no sense for me to get a car right now in the situation I'm in, I'm still so annoyed that I broke a promise to myself, and I wish I could just let it go. It's not about the car. The fact I didn't get a car this year doesn't bother me. It's the fact that I said I would and I didn't. It's the fact that I broke a bond that I made to myself, a promise. And I just wish I could let that go, because things change. And I need to be able to detach from goals sometimes if the goals don't suit me anymore or if they don't seem realistic. The final thing here, I sacrifice quality for the sake of actioning, I think. Lots of things, lots of priority. I wanted to tick boxes. I felt like this has been a very multifaceted year where I've had lots of different tasks to do every single day in my personal life, in my professional life. And I think this long list of responsibilities and priorities has meant that there's been some things that I've not totally neglected. There's not really any major habits that I've stopped doing this year. I've been able to balance all areas of my life, health, business, fitness, sport, social life. I've been able to balance things very well. I think I've been quite varied and multifaceted this year. That's actually a win for me. I'm actually quite proud of how I've balanced everything. But there's still been individual sort of subtasks under those sort of main areas of life that I've been sloppy with. I haven't left by the wayside. I've still done them, but I've been sloppy with. My YouTube channel this year, the Natural Weight Loss Mastery channel. Bit of a joke. Really sloppy. Sloppy with the thumbnails, sloppy with the quality of videos, sloppy with video planning and content. And I just haven't made the progress with my YouTube channel, therefore I haven't helped as many people as I aimed to at the start of the year via my YouTube channel. I thought about this in the gym. I was in the gym yesterday lifting some weights, and because I've been so focused on the kickboxing this year, the Muay Thai this year, and still been playing a lot of tennis, but that's more for fun. I'm not super serious about that. But because of the kickboxing this year and the interclubs and whatnot, I was so drawn into that I think with the gym, I was still going to the gym, but I wasn't really giving it everything. I probably didn't lift as much weight. I probably didn't push myself. There were probably days where I'm sure I had great workouts. The one I had yesterday wasn't that bad. But there were days where I probably had a few more reps in me and I didn't push myself. And I think, I'm not really bothered. Like, I'm not trying to build muscle or anything like that. But just another example of how I think I've got sloppy with some things in my life. And I don't know if this is a result of complacency or, like I said, a bit of a shift in my priorities, like with the gym example. But either way, regardless of what the cause of my sloppiness and lack of quality with certain tasks is, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter what the cause was, because ultimately those things hurt me. Ultimately, the YouTube videos, being sloppy with those, it hurt me. My channel died hard this year. My Instagram did well, but my YouTube channel died hard this year. I'm trying to resurrect it now, bring it back to life, give it CPR. And I'm struggling, I'm battling, but I'm still going. There's a bit of a heartbeat, a faint heartbeat, and I'm still going. So, like I said, I don't know if it was complacency, shifting my priorities, but it doesn't matter because it didn't produce the results that it usually did, and it cost me regardless. So it's something to fix. And that's it. Those are my big screw-ups this year. Thank you for listening to my ramblings. Let's just balance this out a bit, because this has been a bit negative Nelly, hasn't it? But some wins this year. Client transformations and testimonials. Non-clients helped. Amazing. Another 100-odd people, as I say, through Vegan, Slim and Sustain. Huge success rate as per industry standards versus industry standards. I'm really pleased with that. Massive win. Social life, as I alluded to right at the start, has been utterly amazing. So happy with that. Massive win this year. Not that it's necessarily that calculated, like, I'm going to work on my social life this year. I don't really conscientiously think about it, but it just so happens to have been fantastic. Travels, adventures, that sort of August, September period where I went, I don't know how many holidays I had in that time, in that 2 or 3 months. I had one every couple of weeks, it felt like. And it was just brilliant. And just solidified great friendships as well this year. New people in my life and solidified current friendships really nicely, I think. I really listened to my needs this year and I responded to them. Very happy with how I did this. I had phases. In February, I said to myself, right, I really need to restructure the Vegan, Slim and Sustain program, how I help my clients. And I basically sacrificed for the entire month and just went all in on that. You could think, I could play devil's advocate and say, well, I neglected this need, this need, this need. Here's the difference. They weren't needs at the time. The only major need was restructuring my business, because that was what my intuition told me I should do next. And I had to honor that. I had to listen to that. And I didn't feel guilty about the things I quote unquote missed out on, because I didn't feel like I was missing out on them. When the mission is great enough, it doesn't really necessarily feel like sacrifice. It doesn't necessarily feel like you're missing out on anything else. And then in September, where I felt I've worked very hard this year, I deserve, a bit more leisure time. I listened to that and I booked a couple of trips and I pivoted fast when I felt the urge to have experienced something different in my life. And I love that. I love that life goes in these phases and stages. I never used to understand this when I was 18, 19, 20 years old. But now I really accept that life comes in funny stages and you need to listen to your needs at that time and get quite intuitive with that. And it takes experience. Another thing I'm really happy with is after the crypto loss that I spoke about 10 minutes or so back, I went into overdrive and I made, without disclosing details, a really good amount of money in one weekend, an amount that, it was unfathomable to me at the time that I made that amount in just one weekend. And it's really not about the money, although that did make me feel better and slightly more secure after losing the amount of money I did in September on crypto. It really wasn't about the money. It was really nice to see my response, to not just be a victim to that situation and think, oh my goodness, it created a great anger and frustration, which I was able to positively channel as motivation. And that was great. I think another win this year is the Muay Thai stuff. I'm not where I want to be with it. I'm not a fighter. I have no intention of being a fighter. I do not think I'm a hard man or anything like that. The 2 interclubs I did this year, to get in the ring with a stranger, wasn't a professional fighter or anything, but to get in the ring with a stranger, I'm really, really pleased with that. And young Ryan Adams, if I went back 5 years and told myself that I'd be doing that at age 28, I'd be like, no, you're not cut out for that. You're a bit of a weakling. You won't do that. You're a bit scared of physical confrontation. Not anymore. Good Lord, not anymore. And the final thing I've got here, I got pretty good at not blaming or moaning about things outside of my control. So the impending recession, which I know is affecting and will continue to affect my business. I know it's affecting me, but for some reason I feel quite calm and relaxed about it, and I'm ready to pivot rather than worrying about it or feeling like a victim to it. The crypto situation, I mean, I could control it, I couldn't control it. You can see both sides of that coin. But in terms of its sudden decline, that is something I wasn't in charge of. And I had a big loss with that. I had a big screw up. But I didn't sit there and moan about it to the extent that it froze me, right? I did something about it, as I said a minute or so back. I did something about it. I made a lot of money the following weekend. And it wasn't an answer to the problem, but it certainly helped. And it was certainly nice to see my mentality and my response. So as you can see, in hindsight, I think everything considered now, I did the plus points, I did the failures, I did the wins. I feel for me, it's actually been a great year overall. Despite the losses, it's been a great year, and here's, I suppose, to firmly believing that next year will be even better and I can learn from some of these harsh lessons, and maybe you can too, I hope. And that's it for me. Comments down below. Chat soon.